Following video is brought to you by the Boston Sports Entertainment Network. Please consider liking and subscribing for more Boston sports content.
I got the Boston Celtics going to the final. I got them winning the all.
It's time to represent your city. Put your hands up. Cali, you know we do it for Boston. Hey, ain't nobody ballin' like Boston. Yeah, hey, ain't nobody do it like Boston. Where the legends get made, where the banners get raised, bright lights, big stage. Boston. All the fire we bring in a city full of rings, it's a beautiful thing out of Boston. And you ain't hard like that. You don't put it on the line with your squad like that. That's right, Boston. All we do is win like cigars in the gym, and we at it again. I say, Beantown, what's up? What's up? 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 Feel the energy shift. Now we jumping at the gym. Represent, showing out how we ball above the rim. Larry Legend, 86 to the truth in 08. Cement your name with the all-time greats. Still banner 18 in the Raptors. Celtic green, only green that matters. It's about that time. Ain't another city that's louder than mine. Always gonna shine with the game on the line. What you think was gonna happen, man? That's how we do it in Boston. Ain't nobody gonna like Boston. Yeah. Ain't nobody do it like Boston.
What's up, everybody? It's the Dynasty Proud podcast brought to you by BSEN. I'm Ryan. I'm here as always at 19_loading on Twitter. We're coming at you live on this Monday, April 14th, 2025, just a day before the NBA play-in tournament begins. So we can find out who the Celtics will be playing in round one of the NBA playoffs. But before we get into that, I need to welcome our new co-host. It's Cam Manning. Cam, what's up, man? How are you?
Good. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm great. I'm excited for playoff basketball. It's been a long time. So, the team was going through some struggles in January or so. I'm like, you have to remind yourself that this is the part of the season that matters. And so this is what we've been looking forward to all year. The 2024-2025 regular season overall, it's come to a close at this point. Celtics finish at 61-21. And just a fun fact, it's tied for the 8th best season in terms of wins in the history of the franchise. So relative to expectations, what would you say? How did they do? Did they meet, exceed, fall short of your expectations? What did you think they would be this season, and where did they land?
Listen, Ryan, as a Boston kid living here the majority of my life, I think we have been spoiled, and I mean spoiled with winning culture and everything. So every time you come into a season for the Celtics, the Bruins, the Pats, the Sox, it doesn't matter. Like, the expectation is championship or bust, right? So coming into this year, coming off a championship, I kind of felt the Celtics heading into the ring night when they were playing the Knicks at the Garden, like a weight was lifted off their shoulders, right? Because there was all this discourse in years prior about how Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown couldn't coexist on the same team. Like, they couldn't perform in the big moments, couldn't get over the hump. And then whether you think it's a Mickey Mouse championship run or not last year, they did it. They got over the hurdle. They got a championship to both their names. I feel like it kind of relax the muscles, relax the discourse around Boston that they did conquer that and win a championship. But, I mean, comparatively to last year, they were statistically the same and even better. I think that some of the crazy stats that, Boston Sports Radio, Sean Grady posted on Twitter earlier, I kind of picked a little bit of those stats. They were just mind-boggling to read. They have more 20-point leads in games this year than 8-point deficits. Like, that's absurd. I think that little stretch in January, that 10-6 run in January is like kind of way in the rearview mirror because, like, again, we're expecting this team to come out and perform and win every night, and they just got the talent, they got the depth, and I'm excited for another deep playoff run. But, in terms of regular season expectations, I think they performed to about what I thought they would do. Just because you're coming off a championship, you're going to get every team's best effort. I mean, you see the Knicks go all in and get Towns, get Bridges. Like, they're gearing up for a deep playoff run. They're trying to challenge the Celtics. Cavaliers got better. 76ers tried to go the Paul George route, thinking they were going to get prime PG, and it blew up in their faces. So, I mean, when you're the top dog, everyone's going to come after you. So that's what I think is going to be really exciting about this playoff run, is we're going to get every team's best effort, and it should be very exciting come around a couple weeks.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I think I actually expected a little bit less in the regular season than what we got from the Celtics. I was expecting them, and it was close. I was kind of expecting them. I think I said before the season, I was expecting them to be somewhere around 57, 58 wins. They finished at 58 wins, and they finished at 61. So, like, big picture for me, they were better than I thought they would be. And obviously, they're really good. So we're talking about a difference of 3 games over the course of 82. Like, it's not that big of a swing, but they've won 60 plus games now in 15 seasons since the team was founded in 1946. And 7 of the previous 14 times that they did that, they won the championship. So granted, 2 of those were in the 60s, and that was a different game. But another thing I thought was kind of interesting for this year, this season, they posted their second best offensive rating of all time as a franchise, second only to last year. So,
and that resulted in the championship. So if history's telling us something, should lead to banner 19. Should lead to banner 19.
We'd like to think so.
Yes.
So, but the other thing on the flip side of that I thought was a little bit intriguing was since the 07-08 season, I was just looking at since then, because obviously it's a different league now than it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s. There's a lot more points than there used to be. So defensive rating is something that looks different than it. And it's true of offensive rating too. But since 07-08, when they won with Pierce, Garnett, Allen, all those guys, this season in 2024-2025 was actually their 4th worst defensive rating as a team. But last year was their 2nd worst season in that span, and they won the whole thing. So it might not tell the whole story, but it's interesting to see the approach that they've taken for offense versus defense. And I'm curious to see how it plays out as far as whether that pays off in terms of multiple championships or if it is just the one. And obviously we're hoping for more than that, but it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to those numbers that you just laid out, like the 2nd worst defensive rating as a team since you said that 07-08 run, the 2nd worst defensive rating, I feel like that kind of ties into the fact that, like, Kristaps Porzingis, the big headliner when we got him and Drew Holiday and made that championship run, I feel as though that when you're looking at Porzingis and his impact, like, just his presence on the floor is substantial enough to be like, make shooters weary. Is like, okay, I can't drive the paint because there's a 7'3" Lafayette just standing there waiting to reject my shot. And you realize that he wasn't available for a good chunk of the beginning of the year because he was recovering from that injury last year that he suffered in the playoffs. And obviously the paint defense took a major hit when he's not playing. So I feel like, and we'll get into this later on in the pod, but the health of KP and JB are super important if they want to repeat for the NBA title. And it all starts with the defense, and we'll talk about Missoula ball and defense versus offense, how we go about like it in a playoff perspective, because there's a very little room for error. You're not playing the Washington Wizards. You're not playing the Utah Jazz every night. You're playing against OKC, who had an historic season, Cleveland, who's looked so good for so much of the year. And, the game completely changes when it comes playoff time. Very minimal room for error in that regard.
Yeah, and we'll get into this in a little bit too, but you expect rotations to tighten up a little bit. Matchups are going to look different on the floor in the playoffs. That's just the way it usually goes. And the thing, one of the things I wrote down from just kind of researching overall this season, in terms of team stats for franchise history for the Celtics, I was just looking at a lot of those numbers because they kind of stand out because it's so different since Joe Mazzulla took over. The Celtics finished this year with their lowest relative pace in franchise history. And what that means is relative to the pace of the rest of the league, they were significantly slower and play a much slower brand of basketball to the league average. They just play so much more in the half court. And that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just their strategy. But it's clear that it's a concerted effort with Mazzulla because it's been a steady decline in pace since he took over. And the way they define pace is an estimate of the number of possessions per 48 minutes in a game. And so in Joe's first year in 2022-23, they were at 98.5. and relative to the rest of the league, they were a little bit slower than average at minus 0.6. So pretty close to the average. Joe's second year, last year, they go to 97.2, which is minus 1.3 off the league average. This year, they're at 95.7, which is minus 3.1 off the league average, which, like I said, is the lowest relative pace in the history of the franchise. So over 3 seasons, their pace declined about 3%, and it just falls in line with their concerted effort to shoot more threes. I mean, that's the number one thing.
Yeah.
They work extremely hard to get good 3-point shots, and they don't pass them up. So it's just something that I found really intriguing when I was reading through the stats for today. And I don't know how you feel about it, but that was just something that stood out to me.
Yeah, no, you talked a lot about earlier about like the defensive rating, how it's kind of like been skewed because different eras. There's a lot, like teams are hucking up 45 to 53s a game. Like, it's definitely, the game has changed so much since Steph Curry kind of revolutionized it into a 3-point shooting contest pretty much throughout these games. But, from an offensive perspective standpoint, the half court offense that you just laid out with the pace of play, definitely interesting, but I feel as though that not many teams have the embarrassment of riches like the Celtics do from a starting 1 through 5 standpoint. And I feel like there's another underrated factor because you laid out his first year as a coach, the championship year, obviously, and now entering his third year. There's not a lot of roster turnover from last year's team to this year's team. There's a lot of continuity with the team. And I feel like that plays a very underrated role in like you said, garnering a lot of good 3-point shots, passing up a good shot for a great shot. Like these guys are unselfish. Like these guys are looking for the great shot. And I think that's all about Mazzulla's implementation, believing in Joe Mazzulla's mission to get the most out of the offense, get the most out of Jason Tatum, get the most out of Jaylen Brown. I mean, Jaylen Brown, like to your pace of play point, is one of the most electrifying transition players in the league. Like he put him up with Giannis. Jaylen Brown is up there with the best in terms of freak, pure, raw athleticism. And like that's his MO, is like beating guys off the dribble with his speed and his quickness, getting to the lane, scoring in the paint. But I think the thing is that they play 5 out. And with Al Horford and Porzingis being very good, consistent 3-point shooters, that takes people, big perimeter or interior defenders out of the paint, which gives driving lanes for Jason and Jaylen. So I think there's like a more, like, trying to think of the right word, like a mental element to it as well. Like the 3-point volume, and like they just got guys that are pure sharpshooters. You know what I mean? Like, and we'll talk about the depth and the rotations and everything. But I mean, you talk about last year's draft pick, Baylor Shireman. This guy's just another guy that can show up, knock down threes. And he's gotten nothing but more confident in the second half of the year, which I think leads nothing but good things for the Celtics. Like, it's a great problem to have when you're trying to fight for rotation spots in the playoffs. It's just because it's how good your team is. So I think that it is definitely an embarrassment of riches, and it kind of plays into the fact of the 3-point volume being so high. Like I was doing some research prior to this, and I saw like Celtics number 1 team in the NBA in 3-point attempts per game on average, and also number 1 in makes. So it's kind of a feast or famine mindset when you're thinking about it, where it's like, okay, if you hit your shots, you're going to blow teams out, but then you got to scratch and claw. And the playoffs, like we said at the beginning, are a completely different game. And you got to adapt, and people do scouting reports. They know your players' MOs. They know what you guys do well as a team. They know what you don't do well as a team. And so I think you look back also to those OKC matchups, because OKC was one of the 2 teams that we couldn't beat this year in both matchups. We lost. I think they did a good job of, granted, all 5 of the starting 5 are really good shooters, but like they focused on Drew Holiday, who's been battling a finger injury all year, that if he's going to burn us, then he's going to burn us. We're not going to let Jason Tatum, we're not going to let Jaylen Brown burn us from deep. We're not going to let Kristaps Porzingis, although he was out for one of those games, he's not going to let him burn us as a team. So I think that also plays into the consideration of the offensive mindset and the 3-point volume shooting as well.
Well, and I was thinking about this as you were talking, just mathematically, you would think if you're shooting a ton of threes, like for example, this year, they actually 2 years back to back, they've made the most threes and taken the most, as you said, like in the history of the franchise. They've done that 2 years in a row. They've beaten their own records for that. You would think that if you were going to do that, you'd be playing in like an old Phoenix Suns 7 seconds or less, like trying to run and gun. You're getting transition dunks or you're getting threes, and that's it. They don't do that. And what's amazing to think about is the fact that they still, despite playing slower than everybody else, they still manage to get more 3-point attempts up than everybody else, which
the spacing is just so good. The spacing is just so good. Like, who do you like? It's like pick your poison out there. Like, it's crazy to think about, like, because you just said, like, really, when you think about it, like, the pace of play should influence how you attack offensively, and how are you getting more 3-point attempts when you're not, like, getting super wide open looks off transition, you know? Like, in the half-court offense. Like, how are you supposed to do that? It's all about spacing. Sorry to cut you off, but I thought it was really important to mention that. Spacing is super crucial in the Joe Mazzulla offense, and you see it on a game-to-game basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of mentioned the Cleveland, OKC, teams like that, the teams that are kind of the biggest threat to the Celtics this year. I think the Celtics are probably looking at – you'd like to think they're not looking ahead to the teams they have to beat later in the playoffs. They obviously need to get out of round one. They need to get out of round two. They need to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. They need to get to the finals in order to accomplish what the goal is ultimately. They obviously have enough to do that because they did it last year, but it's going to be a tougher road, that's for sure. I mean, New York is healthy this year, and now obviously they've added Karl Anthony Towns. Cleveland has had just a completely ridiculous year. Like, I really haven't been a believer in them all year. I've been doubting them all year, and they keep proving me wrong. So I don't like. I would like to be right at some point about them, but I haven't been so far.
Ryan, the craziest thing is that they were super good up until the trade deadline. Then they got DeAndre Hunter, who I thought was a clear and obvious upgrade over Karis LeVert. Like, in terms of like all around play, DeAndre Hunter's a better defender. He's got more size. He's got more muscle. And he can still shoot it at a great clip. And then you talk about Ty Jerome as well. So Cleveland, like, nothing to scoff at. Nothing to scoff at with Cleveland. And obviously Donovan Mitchell's a Celtics killer. So, I mean, like, get nervous every time he touches the ball against us in a big game.
Well, and I think the key in that series, if and when it gets there, is going to be Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, because those guys they're going to be the difference makers, I think, in that series, because Donovan Mitchell's going to get his points. He's an all NBA level player. He's fantastic. He hits shots that no other human being should ever hit. But you expect that, that going in. It's what you're going to get from Allen and Mobley and even Garland, who I think defensively is going to struggle in the playoffs, as I've been saying. But
he threw up a couple of offensive stinkers last year when Mitchell was sidelined with that injury. He had a couple of stinkers offensively.
But if the defense, if like you said, if Mitchell's off the floor, if the defense can focus all their energy on Garland, he's going to have a hard time, because he's just a slight guy. He needs, I think he benefits from being the second option as a guard. And that's not to say he's a bad player. He's not. He's very good. It's just, his body type is such that he needs to be kind of occasionally away from the ball, benefit from the gravity that Mitchell has, and be able to create off that. And he can create his own offense too. I'm not saying he can't, but anyway.
I think that's just the constant cat and mouse game you got to play as a coach. Like, I mean, for instance, we'll go into the depth, and my concern with the Celtics in any potential playoff series is Peyton Pritchard. Obviously, Celtics fans love Peyton Pritchard for all of his offensive capabilities. Like, him, Derek White, Jason Tatum surpassed Isaiah Thomas from like 2017 for most 3-pointers made in a season, which like kind of ties back to our original point of like, this team just shoots so many damn threes. And like, they got guys that can hit him at such a consistent clip. But my thought process on Peyton Pritchard's like, okay, like, he can move his feet well with guards, but like we do with every other team, we hunt the mismatch in the post when Porzingis is on the floor. Like, what makes them think that like other teams like Cleveland, for instance, can't like switch on to get Evan Mobley on Pritchard? And then you're at a significant disadvantage. You're in rotation. And then you got the sharpshooters outside, like LeVert, like Mitchell, like Garland, who can light it up from deep. Like, that's where my worry is with Peyton Pritchard in like the defensive side of the court, not the offensive side, but how we like kind of mask that defensive liability on the court.
I agree with you. And Pritchard, I mean, he's legitimately their sixth man now, and he's going to win sixth man of the year. That's pretty much locked up. And in years past, he was a strong contributor in the regular season, and then the playoffs came around and you didn't see as much of him. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore because he's such a legitimate part of their offense. They need his scoring, and he's one of those guys who, they talk about, the Celtics have been talking all week about having three guys who made 200 plus threes. Pritchard is one of those guys, and he's coming off the bench. So they need his offense, and how they're going to work him into the rotations and make sure he's not getting abused on defense at the same time is going to be something that's really, really important because, like I said, years past, he hasn't always been out there in the playoffs because they haven't needed him as much. But especially if and we'll get into Jalen's health as well, if Jalen isn't able to play as many minutes, Pritchard's offense becomes even more important now. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how that plays out as well. But going back to the Jalen thing, how concerned are you about his knee? I mean, the reporting right now is he's recently received pain management injections in the knee going into the playoffs. He was, he was looking to meet that 65 game threshold for all NBA and postseason or regular season awards and all that stuff. Ultimately didn't make it, and I do give him some credit for giving that up for the bigger goal, for the betterment of the team. But I also worry that maybe he didn't bail on that goal until pretty late in the process, and he kind of tried to have his cake and eat it too. And I love Jalen, don't get me wrong, but how worried should we be?
I don't know. Short answer, yes, I'm worried because obviously we had that whole ordeal with Kristaps Porzingis. Could we win without him last year? And I think Jalen was close to 100%. He's not close to 100% now. It's kind of scary because, like I said in the beginning, Jaylen Brown relies so much on his raw athleticism to be productive and effective. But I feel 60% of what Jaylen Brown is still better than none. I feel towards the tail end, I was getting a little nervous about his usage towards the tail end of the year because, again, we see these reports saying that he's not 100%. He's working through some stuff with the knee, which is obviously a very tricky injury to navigate because you're stopping and going, your explosiveness limits you, and therefore it limits your driving ability and to stay with defenders, because we saw firsthand what a healthy Jaylen Brown can do to one of the best offensive players in the finals last year, put Luka in a freaking body bag for most of the year, for most of the playoff series in the finals. So in short answer, I'm concerned, but I think just having his presence on the court does the Celtics really well. And even if he's just standing out the 3-point line, just the thought that defenders have in the back of their heads, oh, we got to worry about this guy, It just psychologically, I think it still makes an impact to have him out there. But I get what you're saying by a little hesitant about why are you playing these games? Really glad that you gave up the threshold thing and sat out the last couple against Charlotte, the meaningless games in the last couple of days because the Celtics had locked up the 2 seed a long time ago. But it's from my perspective and what I've been reading is that he's just trying to make sure that it can't get any worse, pain management and figuring out how to play through it and what's the limit he can go to before it's okay, I can't go any farther. You know what I mean? I think it's something that he's just got to deal with throughout the playoffs, unfortunately.
And that's important too. It really is. I don't want to downplay that. Figuring out, because obviously he's the only one that knows his body and how he's feeling. So in the games he played, maybe he was feeling fine. I have my doubts about that because obviously he's only playing 20, 25 minutes a game when he has been out there recently. But I remember one game in particular, he kind of talked about landing after a dunk and feeling it so much more than he was used to. And he's that was kind of disorienting because that's not me. He's used to being the guy that can go up and slam it down and not have a problem. But I guess the real question is, can they win a championship without him? Can they rely on Kristaps Porzingis to be their true second option? If Jalen is completely out, if he's off the floor, do they have enough?
I would like to believe it, but I just can't underestimate how clutch that guy was last year during our playoff championship run. That dude, I think, yes, in a sense of we need Jason Tatum to be a lot more efficient scoring wise than he was at the tail end of the finals run last year. Because I think if Jalen is not playing and Jason is not shooting, then you're relying on players like Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis, who are totally capable of being those second and third options. But it's like, it's one less thing for the team that they're playing to worry about. And, you know, Derek White, love him. He can create offense off the dribble, but he's more of like, you know, he can be a ball handler. But, I mean, I think Jason taking those primary ball handling duties are really important for the spacing and shot creation of this team, just because you put the defense in rotation off the drive because of Jalen's athleticism, because Jason's driving the paint and getting a paint touch. You know, I think that having a healthy Jaylen Brown is essential for this team to repeat. But I wouldn't rule out that they couldn't win without him. I just think the level of competition is so much steeper than last year, because you look at it last year, they played Miami, beat them in 5 games. Then you go on and play Cleveland, who missed Donovan Mitchell for 2 games of that series. And Jared Allen wasn't even playing that well, or even at all really in that series either. And Evan Mobley is a far better player now. Definitely in the conversation for both DPOI and, you know, most improved player of the year. And then you think to that Pacers series. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton got hurt in that series as well. So I think that you got to factor in that these guys are coming at full strength, full squad coming at you. And the fact that Jalen's kind of micromanaging his pain's a little concerning, but like, I wouldn't put it past them to like maybe get by a series or 2 without him, but like going all the way is like very much a stretch, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I think they probably could win at the very least round 1 without him. If he wants to sit out for this first round, I wouldn't mind it at all. And it's sort of the same way I felt about Kristaps. I felt like he came back earlier than I wanted him to this year. I wouldn't have minded if he sat out until the All-Star break, as I said at the beginning of the season. Like if he wanted to only play half this season and just get into playing shape for April, like I would have been happy with that. And I sort of feel a similar way about Jalen. Like, go rest up, make sure you're good. But if it's something that he can't necessarily make any worse by playing, then keep playing. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, so I can't I can't pretend to actually know what's going on inside his knee. But getting into round 1, which obviously we were just kind of talking about for a second, the potential playoff matchups for the Celtics, we're obviously kind of at the mercy of whatever happens tomorrow night in the play-in game between Orlando and Atlanta. And so the Celtics are in the 2 seed, and they're waiting for whatever happens tomorrow night. And I've been saying for weeks now, selfishly, I want it to be Atlanta because I live in Atlanta. I want to go to the games. I haven't been to a Celtics game all year. So I'm rooting for the Hawks, but that's for selfish reasons. Orlando, I think personally, is the tougher series. And they've just got a lot of bigger physical guys. They finished with the best defense by points per game in the NBA this year, allowing just 105.5 points to opponents over the course of the year.
Very solid defensive team. Very good defensive team.
Extremely good on defense, not so good on offense. And the caveat to their defense is that they were 21st, so a little bit worse than middle of the pack in the league in terms of opponents' 3-point percentage, and 23rd in terms of opponents' 3-point attempts. So they let you get shots up, and against the Celtics, that's not going to work. The math
not
is
a good
not
formula. Not a good formula for that.
The math is not going to be in their favor in that series, especially over the course of a series. In one game, they can beat them. Sure, if the Celtics have an off night, they win a game or 2. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But they're also, funny thing about Orlando, they're one of the worst teams in the league in terms of assists. They just rely so much on their individual scoring from Paolo, from Franz Wagner. Those guys are really good players, but matching up against Boston, especially with how good they are defensively, I don't think they have enough. Like I said, those guys could win a game or 2 for Orlando on their own, basically. But beyond that, I don't think of them as too much of a threat. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's my feeling.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta's a really young team, and so is Orlando. I mean, Orlando's been compiling draft picks for as long as I can remember, since like Dwight Howard was on the team, that championship run. But I think, to your point, Paolo and Franz Wagner are going to be relied on too heavily for the Magic. And again, like they could maybe get some stops on the defensive side of the ball. I just like matchup to matchup. I mean, Jalen Suggs is a good perimeter defender. And everyone 1 through 5, they got the size. I mean, Atlanta's an interesting thing to me because Trae Young is a game changer on offense, but again, we kind of tie back into that Peyton Pritchard effect. It's like, how did you overcome that on the defensive side of the ball? Like, it's like Luka in the finals. Like he was kind of like a traffic cone. You know what I mean? Like he was
Dyson Daniels is the answer to that for
a
Orlando.
great barrier thief. Great barrier thief for Atlanta. He's been so good. He's been otherworldly. He's got to be in the DPOY conversation as well. Like
he should be the defensive player of the year. He legitimately should be the defensive player of the year. He's averaging like 3+ steals a game. Like the Draymond thing came out of absolutely nowhere. I don't know why he's the defensive player of the year, but he's going to win it. I have no explanation for that.
I think it's just name recognition. And the name lore of Draymond. Like he's a past champion, kind of sweetens his Hall of Fame case, I guess. But like, if we're talking about like real ball watchers and like real like statistics, like backing up a guy, like Daniels is the guy. Like you just laid it out, like 3+ steals a game. Like he's absurd on the defensive side of the ball.
It's going to be one of the great snubs in award history in the NBA because he's not going to win it, but he absolutely should. Trae, on the other hand, like you said, he's having a monster season. I think this is his best as a pro so far. He's averaging like 11+ assists a game, and he's passing to, as we just said, Dyson Daniels and Karis LeVert and Onyeka Okongwu and Clint Capella. Like it's not exactly an all-star cast there. So I
liked Ricochet's game, the number one draft pick. I liked him. He's a very spotty player, but I feel like he's really grown the second half of the year. So I feel like you can't really underestimate him as well on that team.
Post All-Star break, he has been significantly better than he was the beginning of the year, and he's just been kind of shaking the rust off. People were calling him a bust real early, and I don't think that was fair at all. So he's certainly proven those people wrong, which is cool to see. Another thing about Atlanta, they turn the ball over at a really high clip, 25th in the league in terms of turnovers. But the Celtics don't really generate a lot of steals. So that's kind of a thing that's like, an unmovable object meets, an unstoppable force. Like something's got to give. But if you're giving the Celtics extra possessions, even when that's not their goal, that's probably also not going to go very well. The Hawks, sort of on the flip side of that, it's weird. They just are. Their philosophy or their statistics just tell such an interesting story because while they turn the ball over a ton, they're also second in the league in terms of steals per game. And obviously Dyson Daniels is a huge part of that. But the Celtics don't really turn it over very much at all. I mean, especially between Drew and Derek White, their guards are so safe with the ball. And even Pritchard, he's one of the things that's amazing about him is how well he fends off guys with so much longer arms. He's like, you play middle school basketball and your coach is like, just, put that elbow up in front of them so they can't get to the ball. And you actually see him do that. Like, and he has to, because he's so small compared to all these other guys.
His handle's so tight, and personally watching the Celtics and his development this year is not just a catch and shoot guy, but a guy that can generate offense and not just in garbage time minutes, because garbage time Peyton Pritchard's like first ballot Hall of Famer in terms of that stuff. But my favorite move personally watching Peyton Pritchard play is when he drives to the cup and kind of uses his back to like create separation for guys, like you said, with longer arms. So he just goes straight up with it. Like he creates that separation off his back. He gets guys on his back, and he's just so like decisive with the ball. And to the point about the low turnover ratio, like he's one of the best. I think like Tyus Jones in Phoenix and like Peyton Pritchard, like they have really good low turnover to assist ratios in terms of like relative numbers, assist to turnovers overall. I think they're probably one of the two best players in the league at that.
Yeah, and Jones is another smaller guy too, so you wonder if maybe it just has something to do with their stature. It's just harder for guys to reach all the way down there because they're so small.
Right.
But anyway, back to Atlanta. Atlanta. Without they had Jalen Johnson, who was having a ridiculous year until he ultimately ended up being out for the year, and they did trade DeAndre Hunter. So they lost a good amount of their talent. I think either one of these series, it's probably Celtics in 6 at most. Like, I don't see it going too far beyond that. I think Orlando would take more out of the Celtics physically, if that makes any sense.
No, it does.
Either one either one of these teams could win a game or two, but I don't think the Hawks would be quite as high stress of a situation for Boston.
Yeah, and I think going back to the point, like, Okongwu has been more comfortable going out to the 3-point line, but the same can't be said for Clint Capella. Clint Capella is just a guy that camps in the paint. And like I said, if the Celtics run a 5-out offense and they drag Clint Capella out to the perimeter, like, we know Jason Tatum's favorite matchup in NBA history is when we get the switch onto a big guy and he just cooks them. And then they're in rotation, and then that's when good shots turn into great shots. And that's why, like, that move when Tatum comes off the screen where he has the option to pull up and, like, drive and, like, split the D is, like, one of the most devastating plays to run in basketball, is because he's so good at both 3-point efficiency and the ability to drive off, like, offhand. Like, he's so good at that. And I feel like the Hawks just don't have enough, like, depth on the wings because, like we talked about it, like, Karis LeVert isn't really scaring me, really. He could get hot one game maybe. Like, outside of Trae Young, I mean, Jalen Johnson, like you just said, huge loss for this team because he was one of those guys that high flyer, great 3-and-D guy, like, can create his own offense. But, like, outside of Trae Young, who's spraying the ball all over the place, like, no one really scares me offensively outside of Trae Young. Has a better track record than Trae Young. Ricochet's too young in his career. Still needs to develop. Same with Okongwu. Clint Capella is what he is. And then Karis LeVert's a streaky shooter. And they don't really, like who's coming off the bench for this team to, like, really match up with the bench depth of the Celtics. I don't really see it.
No.
But, yeah, I think to kind of wrap it up, I think just Orlando is just very much a scarier matchup to your point earlier. Like, in terms of physicality and everything that they bring, and they got size and they got offensive capabilities if they hit shots, but Paolo and Franz are still very much one-man bands on that side of the ball. So I think, Celtics in 5 or 6, either way you run it, I think.
And for Orlando, just one last thing too, highly underrated head coach too, in Jamal Mosley. He's excellent.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for him, but you kind of brought up the Tatum pick and roll thing, which brings us to one of the other things we were going to talk about is just some of the playoff rotations for the Celtics coming up. Luke Cornett is a guy I think of in pick and roll with Jason Tatum, number one, because he's been such a fascinating story this year, because I think he finished in, like, the top 5 in net rating in the entire league this year.
I think he finished third. I think it was SGA, J-Dub, and then Luke Cornett.
It's wild. It's wild to think about, because he doesn't look like your typical NBA player. And I don't mean that the way I mean that is the way he moves. Like, he
moves clunky. He doesn't make anything look smooth. He, like, kind of looks clunky out there. He, like, kind of looks like, he's just there for vibes. He's just standing up, putting his hands up, the Cornett contest. It's just so weird. I love him. He's a goofball. He's great.
And his chemistry with Tatum in particular in the pick and roll is just magical. It's like those guys are, like, separated at birth. Like, Luke's positioning is exceptional, and he seems to just always make the right decision. And I think that's been huge, because with Al getting older and Porzingis being an injury risk, Cornett is legitimately extremely important for this playoff run.
Right.
They need him to be out there, and he will be. So I'm curious to see what happens after the season, because he's now a big part of the offense. Even if he's not doing a ton of scoring, the screens are a really important thing for Jason Tatum, because that's how he gets a lot of his shots. That's how he gets into a lot of his action. And Cornett, too, you mentioned what a goofball he is. Like, just a side note, he's been campaigning to win the season-long Tommy Award on NBC Sports.
You see that commercial the other night?
If you have not seen that commercial,
you gotta check it out. It is top-tier content. Top-tier content.
Unbelievable.
I have a question, though, for you, Ryan, just, like, from a personal, like, watching the Celtics. Obviously, Baylor Shireman's really emerged, getting a lot of more run time in the second half of the year. And personally, I love Sam Hauser. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big believer in Sam Hauser. I think when he's hot, he can't miss. But I feel like from the games that I've watched, Baylor Shireman and Sam Hauser kind of give off the same archetype of player. But I feel like there's more playmaking, off the dribble type stuff you can do with Shireman that Hauser just really hasn't developed into. Like, occasionally Hauser will like go off like 1-2 dribbles. Like he's like Kyle Korver, you know, like he doesn't dribble that much, like catch and shoot.
I think it's a great comparison.
Kyle Korver, like he can scorch you for like 7 consecutive threes in a row, but like he ain't taking you off the dribble. Like if you like stay high on that screen and put your hands up, you know, you're gonna get a good contest. And I don't think Sam Hauser's that elite of a shooter enough to be like, okay, I'm gonna drill it. Like if he gets great looks, he's gonna make them. But in terms of like Shireman's confidence, like I wouldn't be mad to see him get some good runs in like crucial situations in the early rounds. Get his feet wet and some playoff experience.
And Shireman's much more fluid of an athlete than Hauser. So
yeah,
his ball handling, his passing, his instincts for basketball, I think just tend to show themselves off more. Not that Hauser doesn't have them, but his role is different with this team.
Right.
Hauser's much more pure spot up for threes. Like you said, Kyle Korver, I think, is an excellent comparison. Now he's not going to shoot the volume of threes that Korver did over the course of his career, but I mean, maybe he would if he went somewhere else. But with the Celtics, he just doesn't have enough. He's not going to get enough minutes. There's only one ball. So for Shireman, we had Justin Turpin from WEI on a few weeks ago. And this was something I brought up with him too, because this was right when Shireman was kind of starting to consistently crack the rotation off the bench, and he was starting to get some legitimate minutes down the stretch in some of these games that were mattering a little bit less. And Justin's infinitely closer to the team than I am. So like he would be the person to trust over me. He just doesn't really think Shireman's going to play very much in the playoffs. And I don't know, especially if Jalen, like we said before, if he's playing more limited minutes, I think you might see Shireman coming in and, get some guys a rest here and there, at least in the early rounds, just sort of get some of those playoff jitters out. Like I would love to see that. And what if they end up needing him more because of a big injury? What if something happens? Or what if, who knows? What if he gets hot? What if he starts just raining threes or whatever? I wouldn't rule it out. I would love to see him worked into the rotation. I'm not 100% sure it's going to happen just because.
Is that just the rookie treatment though, you think? Is that the rookie treatment? Because Sam Hauser's been there, and like again, the continuity aspect, and like players are comfortable with Sam Hauser in the offense, like much more run than Baylor Shireman. I mean, Sam Hauser's been there with the team last year. Granted, I don't remember him having like a breakout game in any of the playoff games last year, like him making a major difference. I could be very much wrong because I don't know every box score from every game last year, but I don't think, for me personally, I view it as like, what's the harm in giving Baylor Shireman an early run in like the early rounds? I'm not saying like he's starting game 1 of the NBA finals. Like I'm saying that like, I don't see much risk in easing him in and getting his feet wet regardless. Like whether or not he plays a significant role, whether the Celtics are up 20 with like 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, like this guy can be an impact guy. Like he can hold his own defensively. So can Hauser to that point. I feel like very much so that Hauser can hold his own against ISO scorers better than people think he can. Just like the metrics and the numbers and just watching him move his feet well with like scorers like Harden and like these lethal guys just trying to get him. Like they think it's a mismatch in those situations, but I think Sam Hauser's a underrated defender, but I think there's more upside and more ceiling with Shireman in these situations.
100% agree. I also kind of see both sides of the argument though. Like if you're Joe, if you have Hauser who's been there, done that, played in the finals, you trust him to make the right reads on defense. You know what you're going to get from him. I understand being a little bit more conservative and tightening up the bench a little bit and just saying, I know what I'm going to get out of Sam. Who knows if Shireman's going to fall apart? Because now he's 24, so he's older, and he has so much more experience playing in college, and he's not your typical rookie. But I do think there is some of that, he just doesn't know what he doesn't know yet. So let's keep him on the bench. We'll see you next year, especially if Hauser's not going to be here, which he might not. So we'll find out. He could be an excellent Shireman Hauser replacement for next year if Hauser happens to be out the door for one reason or another, mostly being financial for the Celtics.
Yes.
which, we can talk about a lot of that stuff over the summer, because right now we don't need to be concerned with that.
We're
too
locked
much,
in playoff mode, baby.
Exactly.
Can't wait for the next 4 weeks to determine my mental health for the rest of 2025. Can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Cannot wait for that.
Yeah. And obviously, like we said, we'll know more about this after tomorrow night, because Orlando and Atlanta are in the play-in game for the 7th seed. And in the West, it's Memphis and Golden State doing the same thing. I can't believe how far Memphis fell. But I don't know if we have time to get into all that. Then Wednesday, it's the Heat and the Bulls. We'll play to see who gets to try to make it into the 8th seed. And then on the other side, it's Dallas and Sacramento. That's Wednesday.
Am I wrong for being a Bulls believer? Am I wrong to see they're starting after being so many years of mediocrity? I'm kind of looking at some of the pieces there, like Buzelis, Kobe White balling out a little bit.
I like Buzelis a lot. I like Buzelis a lot long term, but not right now.
Right. I just there's these players that come out of these teams. I'm like, oh, maybe they can turn the franchise around, because the Bulls have been so mediocre for so long.
Kobe White has been ridiculous for them.
Unbelievable.
I did not see him being as good offensively as he's been recently. They're one of those teams that you flip on League Pass and you don't mind when they're the only game on that isn't being nationally broadcast, that's blacked out. I'm like, I can watch the Bulls. They're fine. They're all right.
Yeah, background noise while you're doing the dishes and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, and this has been great, and obviously we're gonna have a lot more to chat about in the coming weeks with the playoffs going on. Hopefully we'll get some guests coming on leading into each series, recapping games, all that stuff. This is what we've been waiting all year for. So like we said before, this is what really matters. Anything else we should hit on?
Sunday. I don't think so. I think it's just kind of like a wait and see game, and then obviously Jalen's status is super important. I think the playoffs starting on next Sunday is super huge for this team, and just give time for Jalen to rest, and then maybe you kind of look at, like we talked about earlier, look at the matchup and be like, okay, do we need Jalen to get past Atlanta? Do we need Jalen to get past Orlando? Not trying to overlook those guys by any means, because they're both formidable opponents. You still got to play the games, but something to consider.
Absolutely. We're excited for the playoffs, like you said. So we'll have much more coming up next week, and obviously over the coming weeks, but let's get out of here. So for Cam and myself, we will catch you next time.
Peace.
Ends tonight here. It's over. Time to say it again, Boston. Anything's possible. Banner number 18 has been secured. The Celtics are NBA champions.